Good morning, everybody. I'm Randy Barber, and I'd like to welcome you to Weekly Wake Up. As you know, our goal always is to provide updated, relevant information to our colleagues here in the Boulder Valley School District. We're very excited to have you here today. One of the other things that we always like to do is to try to learn from each other and the practices that we have. And I'm really excited today because we've got a group of panelists that are going to talk to us about the RISE program, something that some of our colleagues have been doing for a bit here, and they're going to talk about some of the things that they've learned from it. And one of the things that I love about it is that it's really, right now, we know that our kids are suffering, that they need a lot of support when it comes to the fact that we're remote and they're not, not around their classmates, and it's really tough for them through that. So we want to be talking about, how do we make sure that we're checking in on them and making sure that they're doing okay socially, emotionally. But that all starts with really focusing on ourselves and making sure that we're doing okay and that we're working through our things. We know that our staff is most certainly stressed out. This has been a very, very difficult ride through the whole pandemic. It's hard to believe that it hasn't even been a year yet. It feels like it's been about 2 eons. So anyhow, we're going to kind of dive into that in a second. Before I do that, I do want to just mention that it is a beautiful morning here in Boulder Valley. Looked out the window as I was getting ready and noticed the sun rising. Just gorgeous. We know that we only have a week left before winter break, and so I just want to, have everybody take a quick breath and just savor this moment as we have the last few days with our kids in schools through remote learning, before we get into break, and then really get to enjoy some time on our own and recharge and all those kind of things as well. I also just want to mention that this is a pretty amazing time in terms of the fact that our chef Ann Cooper is going to be retiring at the end of this month. And so as we go into winter break, we are celebrating Ann and her accomplishments within the school district and beyond, and in terms of really bringing school food to the forefront of a national conversation. It's been amazing to watch what she's able to, has been able to do, and the conversations that she's able to start. I loved the other day during the board meeting, she was talking, we were talking about the whole cupcakes and, sugary treats and those kind of things that we first had to start with, and not everybody was happy about that, and now the conversation about healthy foods is just forefront. The other thing that is just amazing about what's going on right now is the food service team and how they're serving our families, our community, when it comes to ensuring that no one goes hungry. It's an amazing effort, and just this last week they hit 1 million meals. And we celebrated that last Monday, and I just think that is phenomenal. It's amazing to watch, and we've got a great video online if you haven't seen it yet. Sam is part of her podcast. I heard it from Sam, which the address is right at the bottom. If you don't tune into those things, please do. It's really fascinating. Sam always gives some tidbits about some science, sciencey, backgroundy kind of things. This time I think it was about the vaccine, but she also talks to people in our district about things that are going on, and really gets to hear voices from the district. So I just want to encourage everybody to do that. And if you don't know, one of the other things, I'm going to just get out of this. Actually, let me mention this before I forget. As always, we are welcoming your questions today. You can go to bit.ly, that's bit.ly/BVSD Wake Up. And that's a great way for you to ask the questions of the panel that's going to be here today. Additionally, please go ahead and open up this link right now if you've got the capability. If you're not on the road or whatever, don't do anything that's dangerous. We don't want any accidents. But they're going to be doing some exercises, and they would welcome some feedback during those things from the group. So this address will be sort of how we accept that feedback. Mary Erin has that open on her computer, and I'm going to introduce her in a second here. But before I do that, I want to mention just one other thing, which is on our Let's Talk engagement platform. And I'm so sorry for all this additional information, but I think it's so important that we bid Chef Ann a good farewell. That we in there we've got a section that's farewell to Chef Ann Cooper, and we're accepting sort of thank you cards from the community. If you haven't had a chance to do that yet, we would love you to go in there and just add a few words in regards to your thanks for the work that she has done. So again, one last reminder: bit.ly/ BVSD Wake Up is the way that you connect with us. I'm going to go and turn this sharing off, and we'll get into actually talking about our subject for today. So as I mentioned, Mary Erin is with us today, and what we're talking about is the RISE program. Why don't you, Mary Erin, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and talk to us about what that whole program's about?
Yeah, thanks, Randy, for the introduction. I just want to point out that I've noticed what you've been doing for your well-being too, Randy. Those things that you mentioned already, noticing nature, noticing what's present in front of us, savoring the moment, all of those things are really important for our own well-being. So I appreciate you bringing those up. But yes, I'm Mary Erin Mueller. I am a behavioral health advocate in BVSD. This is my 3rd year here. And I am also a RISE senior facilitator. So I help coordinate the grant that we have. We have RISE through Kaiser Permanente. We have a 3-year grant that's helping us to fund these wonderful efforts that we have going on within our district. And so really just to give like a quick synopsis of RISE, because we could probably talk a whole hour about just what RISE is. It stands for Resilience in Schools and Educators. And really what that is doing is it's providing a space for us to build our schools' capacity to be trauma responsive, to be resilience promoting, culturally responsive, and social emotional achievement oriented. And as we're doing that, that's all we're really focusing on our students, right? As Randy was already saying this morning, we put all this focus and intention around supporting the health and safety and wellness and success of our students. And oftentimes when we do that, which I think is just probably normal of most organizations that work with children, is that we forget to take care of ourselves, and that there's a really important focus on taking care of ourselves so that we can be present in the moment with our students. And so that's what RISE does as well. We put a heavy focus on being intentional around ourselves and what we're doing to take care of ourselves, how we're supporting our own social and emotional health, our own safety, our own well-being, all of those things. And do we want to have everyone else introduce themselves now? Or?
Yeah, and we had talked about having you guys each kind of talk about how it's impacted you personally. So I'll start with you, Mary Erin, and then if you want to introduce each of the members of the panel that are here today, I'll welcome that.
Absolutely. So it's funny because I think a lot about how my first year to a year and a half, I was sort of in this learning BVSD, learning RISE, kind of in this place of I'm teaching, I'm doing all, we talk a lot about having this parallel process as we are engaging in the strategies and skills that we talk about. We're doing that at the same time that we're teaching that to our educators. And so I was having a struggle for a while in doing that parallel process because there was so much new happening at one time. And I really remember this shift when I started to be in interaction with someone else, whether that was a student, whether that was a colleague, whether that was a RISE participant. And I noticed, I should start connecting with this person first. Oh, maybe I should stop and pause and check in with myself here for a minute. And I noticed that shift happen. And since then, I've been able to reconnect with all of those skills and strategies, structures, all of those things that we talk about in RISE so much more quickly, so much more easily. And I can bring those into interaction. And of course, it's not perfect. I oftentimes will think afterwards of all the things I could have done, but that's exactly what we're talking about too. It's how we just bring awareness around our interactions with others, and thinking about how we scaffold those to be really intentional in always connecting first, connecting with ourselves and connecting with each other. So that's how that's impacted me. And I also just want to point out too that we don't have on here today Tammy Lawrence, who is also a RISE leader and coordinator of the Kaiser grant. And so she is here, I believe, listening in as well, supporting us and rooting for us. And she's just a wonderful resource as well in being able to hear about what RISE is, the work that we're doing for educators in our district, and also what we're doing for students as well. Our support services team is available for that as well. And then we have here just everybody here today is also a part of our RISE leadership team, and a part of the work that we've been doing. And these are our go-to people. So remember these faces.
So I'll go ahead and have, why don't we have Sarah go next?
Good morning. Hi, Sarah DiGiacomo from Fairview High School. I am a RISE facilitator, and I've been working with the program now. This is my 4th year, and I'm proud to say one of the graduates that Essie is my co-presenter. Are we on the screen by ourselves, or are we like all together?
Yeah, the way it shows is just, I think, your face up there.
Just me. And I was noticing this morning before we started, I was feeling a little nervous coming on. And I was just thinking, listening to Mary Erin, how articulate she was. And I was like, I know he's going to pick me to go next. And here I am. You know, the makeup artist didn't show. We talked about this. So I hope it's going okay. But so when I think of RISE and what it does for me, it helps me when, things aren't going great. Maybe like right now. Let me help that out. And then I would go ahead and say, we should go to Essie next. She's who I train with at Fairview.
Okay, Essie, you have been nominated.
Hello, hi, my name is Essie Hengeveld, and I'm at Fairview High School. In my day job, I'm a special ed teacher. I work with kids in the multi-intensive program. But when I'm not doing that, I am a RISE facilitator with Sarah, and this is our 2nd cohort that we've trained together. And I came through the 1st cohort 4 years ago, a long time ago. And RISE has been for me, it's taught me that I just love teaching adults. That's something that I've recently discovered. I love being a facilitator and working with the adults and developing connections inside my building outside of my usual discipline, right? I very rarely have an opportunity to interact with like IB physics teachers, and it's part of my day job. And so getting to know people through the cohort has been wonderful. And then the other thing is that it also, like everybody else, it gives me sort of a reminder and permission. We're all doing this gesture here. We're going to explain more about that. It's not a coincidence. But I just, this permission to stop and pause and check in with how I'm doing before I try to help other people. We talk about putting on your oxygen mask before you try to help others put on theirs. And RISE has been a really wonderful reminder that I need that too.
Thank you. That's excellent. I would be remiss to mention that we have one member of our panel today that is actually not a BVSD employee. Monica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, good morning. My name is Monica Fitzgerald, and I'm a clinical psychologist at the University of Colorado Boulder here. And I'm also one of the developers of Resilience in Schools and Educators, RISE, the RISE program. So it's been a complete honor to work with all of these individuals and many more in this district and other districts in Colorado. And I think that just day to day and moment to moment, I feel really filled up because these are life skills. They're for all of us to help us kind of maintain inner stability, grounding, connection when we are working with others, when we're serving others, when we're connecting with others. So despite what is happening, whether it's this really longstanding pandemic you were talking about, Randy, or the other things that happen in our lives, how can we cultivate this inner stability and strength and connect with others? So it feeds me daily, but it's also working with educators and learning with them and from them how to better support them, because they're with our youth, our children, every day, all day long, whether it's on the Zoom or if it's in person. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Carla.
Hi, I'm Carla Royts, and I also am a teacher at Fairview. I teach language arts, mostly 10th grade. And I graduated from the RISE program in the spring, as Sarah and I were talking about earlier. It was a during, mid-pandemic graduation. And I think for me, probably the biggest thing that RISE has given me is I would echo a lot of what Essie says in terms of permission to put your own oxygen mask on first, and also sort of a reminder to go with my instinct, which is often to prioritize my relationship with the students, over their grade or their assignment or whatever thing we're working on in class. And a reminder that I am the intervention, my own presence in the classroom and my own sense of groundedness and my ability to take care of myself emotionally and be present with them is what helps create this atmosphere of trust and positivity and consistency in the classroom. And I think that we get a lot of messages as teachers, especially Fairview. People tend to be pretty academically focused and prioritizing, getting those grades and getting into a good college. And I think RISE has given me permission to ignore that and say, no, this is what's important.
Awesome. Last but not least, Elton.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elton Davis. I am an engagement specialist in the East Network. And I've been a part of this just as long as everybody else has, and it's been a pleasure. I would say how RISE has impacted me and my position of having to work kind of across the board with administrators and families and students. You really have to be at a point where you're giving the best of yourself. So being able to check in and make sure I'm grounded before I'm giving myself to others has been a really big change. Really taking the time to make sure and check in with myself has been a really big shift in making sure that I'm providing my best self for the people that I'm working with.
Excellent. I want to go back to Monica for a minute here. The idea, and I think we tend to be in our little bubbles or in our little silos or whatever metaphor you want to use. And, I think, and I want to come back to, also the idea of kind of being your best self that Elton was just talking about there, because I think in our bubble, we want to do that. But the idea that this transcends us, that educators across, I love the fact that someone outside of educators has said, the health of educators is really important here. And so this is pre-pandemic, but the idea, that folks are like, educators are really under a stressful place and they're trying to take care of others all the time. I think about the way, like during the early pandemic days, there's a lot of conversation about compassion fatigue. And, I think that's got to be, very true for educators as well. As you're looking around at other school districts, not to say that we're not special and whatever, but we share something, kind of universally with others across the state and throughout the nation and world, right?
Absolutely. So it's yes. The answer is yes. So, and that's, I think, a sense of we're not alone, we are connected, that we're hearing that this focus on educators and allowing them and giving them permission to bring themselves, as Alton's talking about and the other panelists, and versus checking, like having their professional self to show up, of really kind of honoring yourself, bringing yourself to the table, but making space for it and making space to connect, because it can be very isolating, as you were also referring to, Randy, in the space of teaching. And I think that connection and social connection with other educators, because in RISE we do bring together professional learning communities, and so they're learning together but connecting together in really authentic ways. And yes, the other districts that we're working with and educators similarly are talking about how it's a space that they don't oftentimes find themselves in. Yes, they're learning about the curricula and talking and exchanging ideas in other ways, but not around how do I sustain myself so I can be here in the long term.
And I can imagine during the pandemic, this has only grown as a need. Yeah, I see you kind of shaking your head there.
Well, yes, and there's so many things on the plate. You might think, oh, we'll take this off, but actually, I've been so impressed that districts have been saying, well, we've always thought this was important, but they're really prioritizing it, and also not just for this short bit, but it's a long-term, work.
Perfect. I am going to go back to Elton in regards to that best of yourself, and in the context of the pandemic. It reminds me of an old thing I learned a long time ago when I was a teenager as a lifeguard, and the idea that when you're drowning, the only thing you're thinking about is getting to higher ground, and so you're it doesn't matter if somebody comes to help you. You don't see them as a person; you see them as something to grab onto and try to get above the water. And I feel like as professionals too, that it's sort of similar, not exactly the same thing, of course. Maybe the analogy is a little broken, but the idea is like you're trying to get up out of this thing, and the only way to do it is working harder and being, not taking care of yourself. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a natural instinct to go. It's about, I got to stop for a second here and make sure I'm all right first.
Exactly. I think in terms of naturally, our positions are those of providing assistance and supporting others, and there's never enough time in the day to be able to do what we would like to do all the time. So it's easy to just keep going, and the person that's regularly forgotten is yourself, because you're thinking about others and how I can support as much as possible. But this is the good thing about the program, is it reminds you that yes, you can take care of other people, but can you do that to the best of your ability if you're not okay yourself? Right? So making sure, again, that we're able to look inward and ask ourselves the question of where am I at right now? So I can make sure that I'm good for the people that I'm supporting is a big, it's really important. And that way you're able to make sure that the people that you're working for are getting what's needed.
And I like the analogy. I can't remember who said it, Carla maybe, about and I've heard that before from this group, like the face mask. You're on the plane and that's one of the first things they say, put it on before you put it on your children. And I remember, going to an event. This is pre-pandemic, so it was when we could all be in a room, and there were like reports back from schools that had been participating in it, and it was really kind of reassuring to hear. Again, it's okay to do this work, because I think there's sort of this feeling of like, gosh, you're really gonna let somebody down if you stop to take care of yourself. Anybody want to talk about some of the things that and I know we kind of started with some of the benefits that it's had to you personally, but the outcomes that you've seen through this happen, how it's transferred to kids, any of that. I will welcome anybody. Sarah? Oh, I see Mary Aaron had her mic open too. So maybe we'll go Sarah first and then Mary Aaron.
So I usually notice it through the teachers, through the kids. So the stories that I hear about how a teacher took a minute to, rather than react to something that was happening or said, or maybe someone hopping into their Zoom call that wasn't supposed to be in that room, wondering instead what's going on with that kid. So that's probably the biggest shift, is rather than being flustered and annoyed, which we get to be flustered and annoyed when something happens that's not supposed to happen. But then having that minute to go, ooh, what's going on with that one? And they can do that for other teachers too. So when someone else is maybe not their best self at a meeting or whatnot, they can, rather than get upset about it because they have that minute, like we keep talking about, where we take a breath and it's more than just taking a breath. We take stock and be like, I'm noticing I'm upset by the actions of somebody else. And then you can be like, wow, I am upset. And then I wonder what's going on with that person, so you can extend a little bit of empathy out there, which is super hard to do right now. I would say we're all a little exhausted, and which is when we need each other to help, which a lot of us are calling on each other to help during times like this. And I want to hear what Mary Aaron was going to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I had kind of two things sort of I'll start with just some of the outcomes that I see. I hear a lot about how RISE has helped to create community amongst staff. So there's just this thing that happens that's almost undescribable sometimes where, and I think, Fairview has had quite a few cohorts go through and they've seen this many times, and I've seen it with my other schools as well, where it just creates this sense of camaraderie and like I have people in my corner. I have someone that I can go talk to when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed or I'm really excited about something. So there's a really nice sense of community that has come from RISE. And I was also so part of RISE, we do one-on-one coaching with all of our educators that are a part of the program. And I was doing one of those earlier last week. And I was talking with this educator about what were your motivations around RISE? What made you want to do this? And she said, I want to keep doing my job for 20 years, however many years to come. And RISE really stood out to me as a way that I can learn how to have like joy with my students every day, ways in which I can just be present and come feeling joy and happy, and also taking care of myself so that I can be able to show up every day. And I just thought it was really beautiful to hear someone say, like, I want to do this program because I want to keep doing my job and I want to keep doing it well. And there's really something to be said about that and taking care of ourselves, right? That when our buckets are full, we're able to wake up and go to work the next day and the day after. And a part of RISE is just putting more tools in our toolbox for when our resources are depleted. And also for when we're feeling well, right? We don't have to be feeling bad in order to pull things into place, right? When we're feeling well, we want to be able to continue that. And so these resources just help us to sort of stay consistent as well.
Well, that really goes along with, what we kind of, in fact, I think there's an article coming out this week for Spot where we talked to a couple of our BVSD mental health advocates, and they talk about the window of tolerance, right? And when you get less sleep, or you're stressed out or whatever, that window closes, or you don't feel like you have a lifeline, and then the tools are so that was exactly where they went. It was how key those tools are. Carla, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and Essie, you're probably feeling this too as a classroom teacher, and I think a lot of us are noticing that our students need us more than ever right now, and we have less, it's harder to connect with them, right? Normally, if I had a student I wanted to connect with, I could just say, hey, can you stay for a second after class? Or I could take them out in the hall, and it's harder to do that now because there's no way to do it without calling them out publicly in front of the whole class. And that is something that can be a little traumatic for them. So, I think it's important to recognize that for classroom teachers, this is more important and harder. And when it does happen, when I am able to connect with students, because some students actually connect really well over email, better than in person. It's even more powerful and satisfying in some ways. And I think that we just have to keep in mind that we're working harder for less reward emotionally than normal. The part of teaching that for most of us, fills our batteries is something we're not getting very much of. So, and at the same time, where the part that drains our batteries, there might be a little bit more of that. So I think that, and having that community of other teachers who have been through RISE, who we do check in with each other and, remind each other to take care of ourselves, and we meet up and go for walks. And I think that's been a really useful tool, as you guys have been saying.
I'm so glad you said that too, Carla, and because I think that, when you're talking about these situations where you're away from colleagues or, you're sort of isolated from everyone else. And I think about just amongst my own team, I'm looking out into an empty office right now. And we oftentimes will talk about, like, normally you could just stop by somebody's desk, you can give them a high five or yell across the room when something's gone really well. Right now, it does take like super extra effort to go and track them down, or, remember to go send that Google Hangout or whatever. And so I really appreciate you saying that. I think it's classroom and otherwise in this district is I think about delivery folks or whoever, I'm sure that this just feels like a very isolating moment. Sarah.
And I was just going to notice that a lot of us are just missing those micro moments that we get that positive reinforcement either from the kids or from each other. With the eye roll at the copy machine because by accident you made it all bad again and or whatnot. And it's like those little moments of co-regulation are hard to get when we're all like in our basements or in empty offices. And so just knowing that it's like that's kind of normal that we all feel that way, and then thinking to yourself, like, what are my sources of strength? Like, who can I call or just send a funny picture to, who would appreciate this quote that I saw somewhere? Those little, like, what can we do ourselves individually to kind of both fill our needs and maybe give a little bit to someone else? So it's something that I think about often.
Awesome. And our poor, significant others or dogs sometimes take the brunt of the venting that might happen when we're not, we don't have an opportunity to just handle those things normally too. Okay, so I'm going to just share my screen real quick here, just to remind everybody that as we kind of open up to talking about some exercises here, some things to think about, that if you want to reach out to the panel today, bit.ly/BVSD wake up. And again, Bitly's got that little dot in there, so don't forget about that as you're doing this. I'm going to turn off sharing and go back to Mary Aaron and just have you kind of talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you guys do in RISE typically.
Sure. So RISE is like a lot. It's hard to sometimes put it into a couple of sentences. So, right, when we think,
and I should say, part of the purpose here is to kind of wake folks up to that this is out there, right? And we'll hopefully, kind of embed this further into our district. So this is a little bite-sized piece of hopefully something bigger coming out. Sorry.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, is that we certainly are starting smaller, and our goal is to, over these next 3 years, to have RISE in potentially 50% of our BVSD schools. So that's just sort of a overarching goal that we have in mind as well. And we are currently in 7 schools right now, and we have 2 schools that have had RISE previously. Aren't participating this year because of all these strange things that are going on. But as you have RISE, you can have it whenever you want. That's sort of the idea, that once you have someone trained and in-house, and we are expanding our reach by training facilitators each year as well, is that it's going to be easily accessible. So we have the sustainability plan to sort of expand it and make it really accessible for all of our schools. And so RISE has a few different components to it. We have some larger professional development pieces that are typically hosted with a full school staff. And those are PDs surrounding intentional environments. So thinking about how are we setting up our school and classroom environments at the beginning of the year, really intentionally thinking about our routines and our rituals, the energy rhythm throughout the day in our transitions. We have one, trauma and resilience. So what is trauma? What does it look like? And how do we buffer that? How do we meet that with resilience? Cultivating educator well-being. So everything that we're talking about, we have a full PD that talks just about that. How do we cultivate well-being within ourselves? And then we have an opportunity for a smaller group cohort where so a group of educators from a particular school can volunteer to be a part of this cohort that meets 8-ish times over the course of the full year. And that's where we really dive into specific skills and strategies and interaction, where we get to connect with each other, where we get to know each other, where we build that sense of community and belonging with each other. And we talk about specific skills, but really what we're doing is we're talking about how we can connect with students in healthy ways that are trauma responsive and resilience promoting. And then not only is that in relation with students, but then we can apply that beyond to with our colleagues, with our family members, with our friends, whoever that might be for us in our lives. And so we have 8 opportunities to do that over the course of the year. And then we also engage in one-on-one coaching with our educators as well. So we really want to keep this program engaging. We want to keep it really relevant to each person, and that's where that coaching comes in. We don't always get to talk about each person's specific scenarios when we're in that small group. So we have coaching where we can build goals. We can talk about specific situations or scenarios that someone might be going through, and how we can use RISE skills to sort of help with that, or how we can check in with ourselves first to sort of tune into our own feelings, and that can help to calm and bring us some peace. So there's a lot of different pieces to this RISE program, and I don't know if anyone wants to add anything that I might have missed. I see some heads shaking no. All right. And I think, to be a little more specific too, we talk really cryptically almost about all these things that we do, right? All these resources that we have. And there's really no one answer, right? There's not like here's the checklist of things you're going to do, and then you're going to feel really well, or then you're going to have really strong connection with students. And that's not what it is. It's not like a end all be all, right? It's really about increasing our capacity to have this mental, emotional space to be able to take on whatever comes to us, right? Because we don't know if we're going to be in a pandemic. We don't know if one of our students is going to have something happen at home that was really difficult. We don't know if something's going to happen in our own lives that's really difficult. So we want to be able to increase the capacity to be able to take those things and not necessarily let them knock us down, right? Not necessarily let them just take us off the plate. We want to be able to understand what's going on for ourselves, and then be able to reach out and connect to whatever resources that we might have that can help us through whatever that is, with ourselves, with our students, with our community, whatever it is that's going on. So that's really where it comes in, this gesture, this thing that we've all been doing. That's what we mean by tuning in with ourselves. And we use this gesture to help remind us to do that, and to help us really focus our attention to that checking in with ourselves. And I think later towards the end, we'll actually do a little bit of a experiential practice where we can all do that. Or if we feel like we want to do that now, I saw some nods.
Sure.
All right, well, let's drop into that. Let's do this. So we often talk about self-care and taking care of ourselves, and we don't always have the time to do it. And so, or we don't feel like we have the time to do it. And so that's what we're going to do this morning, is just provide a little bit of space for everyone on here to be able to take that moment. And so it might feel a little strange for us that all looking at each other right now, but most of us are really familiar with this. And so this is just kind of like a mindfulness check-in. And I'll be using some gestures and some prompts to help walk us through it. And just sort of take or leave what feels good to you right now. And really just try to use this time to settle into where we're at in the present moment. So you can close your eyes or lower your gaze if that feels okay to you. And just getting comfortable wherever you're at. Sometimes making some adjustments to your body feels really good. Just feeling relaxed and settled. And then we're going to place your hand on your heart if that feels comfortable to you. And this gesture of hand to heart is really about tuning in. We're thinking about, what am I feeling right now? And what do I need? We're just noticing thoughts, sensations, allowing whatever comes to the surface to just be there. And allowing yourself to take some deep breaths here. What am I feeling? What do I need? And this gesture of hand to heart is a gesture of self-care, compassion, and nurturance for ourselves. It helps us to tap into our intuition, our wisdom, our creativity. It is supportive just on its own. And then our next step is hands reaching out with palms up, if that feels good to you. And when we come to this step, we think about those around us. Maybe that's your students or colleagues. Maybe that's family. We think about, what are they feeling? What do they need? What is their perspective? What is their experience? What are they feeling? What might they need? And then for step 3, we put our hands together in connection in any way that might feel good to help us think about connecting resources to our needs. What resources do I have or can I tap into to meet my own personal needs? What resources do I have or are available to me to meet the needs of those around me? So that we can move forward in connection, in relationship, in a positive space. Maybe just taking one more deep breath here. Then, as you're ready, you can bring your attention back. I think I needed that little pause there, that moment. My system feels calm and regulated now. And maybe if anybody wants to share out, I will open it up to this group here just to say that how that made you feel or what you noticed. And if anybody listening in wants to contribute, you can type into the bit.ly question box any just noticings, and I can see if there's anything coming through on my end about that too. Does anybody want to share how that made them feel?
I'll just say, should I go ahead? Okay. I felt that my students were exhausted and needed my compassion and my patience, and I knew that I could give that. So that was a nice experience to realize that there was something that they needed, and once I recognized that need, it's pretty easy for me to provide that.
Elton.
What I just experienced is a sense of relaxation and really being ready for the rest of the day. So that was awesome.
Effie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just that I was really thinking about how I have a 4-year-old at home, and things have been really, we just moved and his daycare opens and closes and things have been really stressful. And I was just thinking about how we have a therapy appointment for him today, and I am so proud of myself for finding a resource for something that I needed, because things have been really challenging, and that like we're making that connection, like we're getting some needs met for myself and my family during a really hard time, and I felt really proud of myself.
You know, in hearing from you guys too, it makes me think about the fact that while we are living in a very unusual time, which brings, of course, an enormous amount of stresses. And I just even think about the conversations I had with my parents and in-laws this weekend about Christmas and what that might look like and the things that people need to do in order to bring us together properly, et cetera. anyhow, that just gets me stressed out even just thinking about it. I might need to take another couple of minutes here. But my point of saying that is that the idea that the world kind of goes on, and so like Essie was talking about moving, and I mean the normal stresses are kind of built, on top of or intermixed with all these other things that we're having to deal with for the first time or whatever. So
Yeah.
more important.
My 4-year-old is he's still 4, and like he won't stop doing that just because we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Teaching online, he's still 4.
Yeah, my kindergartner does the mom, right, kind of thing, and while you're working and all. I mean, it's an enormous amount of things when you're doing remote learning from home. So anything else anybody wanted to add before we did get a couple questions from folks out in the rest of the community, but anything else that you guys wanted to add first? Okay, I'm saying no. So Elton, go ahead.
So I would just say that it is extremely important to remember that, and it was said earlier, that RISE is basically a toolbox. Mary Erin mentioned that there is a lot of components to it, which is great that we're all learning all of these things because we don't know what we're going to encounter on a day-to-day. So being able to have resources at the ready and strategies at the ready are important, especially in a time like this, because everything that was kind of like minor is now heightened. So having things that we can fall back on is extremely important right now.
So I think these questions are actually perfect to kind of go from there. For these folks that want to have interaction with RISE moving forward, one was the question about, would you consider reaching out to Kim Blowman and ECE, Early Childhood, to explore possible RISE program with ECE teachers across schools? BVSD preschool teachers are in a unique position of both being general education teachers as well as special education teachers, and our PLC work is often different, less applicable from the K-5 in our building, since curriculum and assessment looks quite different in PK. It would be fabulous to connect our other colleagues in ECE, specifically through our zones for this support. I'm imagining the answer is absolutely, but I don't want to speak for anybody. Mary Erin.
Yeah, it is absolutely. And I would encourage anyone that's interested in RISE and has more questions about what it looks like to implement RISE into your school or area network to reach out to myself, or if you know of somebody in your specific school that are, so like anybody in Fairview can reach out to Sarah or Essie or Carla. So if you know of someone specifically in your school, you can reach out to them. However, I am always a great resource and I can help have those conversations and lead you in the right direction.
How does that typically work in terms of, so I know one of the other questions was about, hey, how do I become a RISE facilitator? What's the process? Does it typically kind of start with someone saying, like, I want to lead the process, or kind of identifying, gosh, we're a staff that really needs some help. I'm not sure who's going to lead this, but let's bring a program in here to help?
Yeah, that can go a couple of both ways, really. Just kind of how it fits best. So like I mentioned earlier, we are training more and more facilitators each year so that we have sort of that staff reserve. So when a school says, I want to participate in RISE, if they don't already have someone that's trained or that's interested in being trained as a facilitator, we have facilitators within our district that we can call upon to lead that group. And as a part of our sustainability plan, we would be happy to have school-based facilitators. So someone that's already a full-time employee of that school and says, this work is really important to me and I'm really passionate about this. We are happy to train those people. That would just be some conversations with myself and some of our RISE leadership team about if that's something that's feasible and appropriate for each person. And then we would have another, usually I think once a year, we would have a new cohort being trained as facilitators. And at the beginning of a year is when we would typically start a RISE program within a school as well. So if anyone's interested now, we'd be having conversations about getting that started in the fall.
And I guess just so that they can kind of understand what the commitment is, so to speak, I can imagine that they do have to kind of reserve some time to have, these moments and these conversations and PD, et cetera. What does that typically look like?
Essie's got her hand up. I'll let her take.
Let's go.
I just want to say that a lot of other folks here are admin, or like Elton has a job that's maybe not quite like a classroom teacher. If you, as a classroom teacher, like me, you can be trained as a facilitator, but it took 4 full sub days in May, which is a difficult time to take sub days. So if it is something you're interested in, it is totally feasible, but it's a commitment. It's a lot of sub plans to get started. But it's really great. It just takes a lot of energy to get going.
Well, that's a really good point too, that it can look very different for different people in different parts of the organization. Sarah, did you want to add into that?
Yeah, I'm just a huge fan of like being in a cohort. I was in a cohort 4 years ago with Essie. We learned side by side, and it was pretty amazing. And it just really right away, I mean, even we keep saying rise train, but like just being near someone who's had some experiences in rise can help. Vicarious, resilience is a real thing. Practicing together with your language and whatnot. So you don't have to be a full-on facilitator or but if you have staff in your building who are interested, or you yourself are interested, attach yourself to a cohort and have the experience, because it is, like we keep saying, starts with you, and it's worth it.
This reminds me of a little bit like the school PR world, where we have, sort of, even if you're not part of the program, that ability to just sort of talk to somebody that might not be such a bad friendship to form and get some ideas of if this would work for you, but just learning from that, what you are applying to your day-to-day lives probably is super important there. One of the questions I had was just about the ideas. It's very hard to move forward any initiative right now during a pandemic. There's so much more going on. So I know you guys kind of talked, Mary Erin, you kind of talked about the idea that at the beginning of the school year, this is when things start. Have things kind of had to hold during this, or do you guys plow forward, and because you know that this is so important right now?
We have had quite a few holds for sure, because even while this is super important, and while many schools are prioritizing this, many districts are prioritizing this, we also understand that we have to be flexible, and we have to be open to what the capacity is for each school, every staff member. And if there's not space or capacity for it, that's okay. And that just means maybe not yet, maybe not right now. And we want to respect that too. And so we have slipped ourselves in where it has fit really well this year, and where some schools have had some readiness for it for a long time. And then there were some schools that said, you know what, I think we need to really just wait until next year. Mm-hmm. And that is totally, and we appreciate that administrators are taking the needs of their staff into mind. And that's exactly what we're thinking about as we're going into this.
Monica, did you want to add?
I was going to say exactly what Mary Erin just said, is that's part of tuning in. What we encourage and having those conversations with schools, with leaders, with those that would be involved, is what do you need right now? If you tune in at this level of what is needed, and then also knowing that this program really complements other programs. It's not like an either or. And so it can really extend other social emotional learning programs or other programs. And yet the biggest question is always, is it redundant? Because we're not trying to have something that's redundant. And we've found and learned from most of the schools that we've worked with and learned with, is that it's really kind of fit a gap, because the focus is on the adults and not on what do I do with kids, or what do I, bring. Now, it naturally does lend itself, because we do know there is a tremendous amount of research that when you have more socially, emotionally skilled, more tuned educators and adults around youth, they are going to be scaffolding those skills with the youth in a much more powerful ways. So we know by focusing on this, like, the adult, as Carla was saying, as that main kind of facilitator, it goes a long way.
I love that. I mean, you almost think, I always say, like, in my role, you're almost like a lead hiker or something like that. It's not that you know it all better or whatever, but it's that you're applying things that you've learned, right? Like, how to scout, you need to, how to get up that rock wall because you've done it before and you could teach others at that point. So it makes sense that for adults are applying and utilizing these things and have a frustration point, then they can relate that to students because they've been using these exercises. Excuse me. Now, I do want to make sure that we hit one of my favorite things that we do every week, which is the burnt pancake scenario. So, none of us are perfect. We all have trouble. And so I'd love to hear, sort of we close up today, is there something where you kind of failed, but you failed forward and you learned something about it and now you want to relate that? Or conversely, I always want to give everybody an opt out. If there's just something that we didn't hit today that you'd like to say, that would be fine as well. Who would like to go first? Elton, I'm going to have you go first, if that's all right.
So we're just talking about something that we failed at?
Well, just in terms of applying these things, or, really anything is fine.
Okay. Well, I think in terms of not necessarily a fail, but I think if we reflect on each day, there are times that we can think about and say where this can be used. And maybe it wasn't used at a certain time, but it can be used to make things a little bit better, how we can just kind of like reflect on our day. But it also creates habits to where you start the day correctly, like what happened earlier, where we kind of hand to heart and everything. So we can start the day really well, but it also gives us an opportunity to reflect on some things, see what we can do better.
And I think that's kind of perfect too, because obviously you're kind of applying your learnings here in a failure in your classroom or whatever too. So Essie.
So I have a student that I meet with every week. We have a check-in, and one particular week I had been hearing a lot about, like, he wasn't doing his work, he was behind, he was just not participating. And I sat down and instead of doing my hey, what's going on? And being myself, I had gotten all this pressure to make sure this kid got on board. And I was like, I've worked with this kid for 3 years. And he was like, why are you lecturing me? And I was like, I don't know. Because it wasn't it didn't work. I wasn't being myself. I wasn't being attuned to the kid's needs. And I was like, and I was like, I'm so sorry. It's not what I meant. You're right. It's not going to work. It's not working. I'm not being myself. And can we try again? I'll do better next week. Can we try again? And they were like, yeah, okay. And every once in a while, I get this are you going to lecture me? No, I've learned. I won't do it again. But the ability with Rise to go instead of just going, well, this is the way I'm going, I better keep going this way, to be able to put the brakes on and go, I don't know what happened. And then just apologize. Hey kid, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I shouldn't have done it that way. That was a mistake.
And most of the time they're more than happy to give you an okay, it's all right,
And they absolutely, yeah, he was like, yeah, great, sure, but maybe don't do it anymore. And it was okay.
I was going to say, Mary Erin, I think I know that a couple of us have to get off this call too pretty quickly. Did you have anything that you wanted to add real quick?
Sure. I think all the time I could name 1,000 examples of all the mistakes I've made with students, a million times over. And I also think that came up as a defense for me of I'm going to go to the easiest thing, where the same mistake I've made 100 times. And then I decided that, you know what, I'm going to share that oftentimes when I am in Rise workshops or I'm in one-on-one coaching, sometimes I get really caught up in like the things that I want to say, or like really excited about the things that we're talking about. And I totally forget to listen. And I totally forget to just like make space for these people that are in front of me, and really allowing them to just be here, and just inviting whatever it is that is coming up for folks. And so that's a way that I fail forward often, and I just think about that and reflect on that.
Thank you for that. Sarah.
So let me think. I'm thinking specifically of this one admin meeting we were in, and I was, I can be pretty passionate about some stuff sometimes, and then sometimes I'm ready just to move on. And I was ready to move on, and I said something, and one of my team members goes, "Be nice." And I was like, "Oh," and you know what? I needed to be. And it was really funny because I was like, wow. And it took me off guard because I didn't realize that I was just kind of what Marianne was saying, just saying, hearing what I wanted to and moving forward. And then we had a wonderful interaction later when that person circled back and was like, sorry about like saying that like that. And I was like, you know what, I totally appreciate, that circle back is so important too. Never too late to circle back. And it was pretty cool. And we had then we kind of fell forward on that, because I needed to be nice, sir, at that moment.
It happens to all of us at some point or another. Carla.
I have a student who corrects me in class constantly, which, that's fine. I'm not perfect. He's always right. We're reading this long, complicated book, and I'll be like, this happened. And he's like, no, that didn't happen. Like, and I don't know if the students can sense the sarcasm in my voice when I'm like, thank you for correcting me. And it's partly the tone that he uses. But, he is a 10th grader and he's not necessarily aware of his tone. So it was kind of escalating. I was like, and I emailed him and I just told him that the tone he was using made me feel disrespected. And I gave him some suggestions of how he could, still correct me, because I welcome that, but use a different tone. And he emailed me back and he was really nice. And it was all a positive experience in the end, but I did feel myself getting my buttons pushed.
Well, thank you for that. Mary Erin.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to say thank you and goodbye. I got to go start a RISE workshop right now, so I'm going to jump off. Thank you all.
Thank you. If anybody else needs to go, I'll just finish up with Monica real quick, but Mary Erin, have a great day. Thank you, Elton, for have a great day.
It's hard to follow all that was shared because I don't want to take away from that. It's very powerful to hear what everyone's sharing. I feel like this informs me as a parent, and also, on my team, and developing or refining or being flexible with intervention as well. But I'm often called out, by my kids, you're jumping to the roof, which we call jumping to the roof, which is problem solving, too soon versus listening or being supportive, or, you're interrupting Erna, we call it, which if I'm interrupting, or if I, not giving that space. So it's humbling. And yet this helps us to be more comfortable to be in a vulnerable space. I think you're hearing that from others. And we hear that from educators too, that sometimes in that authority position, it's kind of strange to apologize or do these direct things that Carla and Essie and Sarah are talking about, of just, being human and vulnerable, and showing that and modeling that when we do need to circle back and repair or connect.
Excellent. I think that's a great way to end it. I love your terms too. I don't know how often I jump to the roof. Yes, I might have to use that. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank our panel. I know a couple of them had to jump off, but I'm just going to show who's remaining with us and just thank those that had to jump off. We totally understand that it's a crazy world, and when you've got to get more of these folks joining the RISE revolution, we want them to be able to do that. So I'll take that happily. Also, just mention again that we very much appreciate everyone participating in the Wake Up. We are going to put out sort of a survey in our weekly wrap up, in which we're going to kind of ask some questions in regards to how useful this has been, places that we might be able to improve. So I just want to mention that as well. But I just want to wish you a great week. Thank you for waking up with us, BVSD.